Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here with you guys. As your pastor said, I am from Milford, Delaware. Has anyone here been to Delaware? Okay. Has anyone been to Milford? So just an interesting quick story about that. I was in Argentina one time for a meeting, and I met a missionary there from Peru who was serving in Colombia, and he asked me where I was from. And I said the United States, because that's the general answer that I would give to people. And he said, no, which state? And I said, Delaware. And he said, oh, anywhere near Milford. And at this point, my jaw was on the floor. And it turned out that he was the father of my pastor emeritus's grandson's wife, or something convoluted like that. But it's a small world, and it's even smaller when you're a Nazarene. So just to start off, telling you a little bit about me, I went to Milford, Delaware High School for all of my, well, not high school for all of my time, but I went to Milford School District and graduated from Milford High School. And while I was in Milford High School, I went on somewhere between 6 and 7 work and witness trips. 3 of those work and witness trips were here in the U.S., and one of them was to a Nazarene campground in Summersville, West Virginia. So it's good to be back in West Virginia, a little ways away from there. But after I graduated from Milford, I had taken 5 semesters of Spanish, and I decided that I wanted to be a courtroom interpreter. So I enrolled at University of Delaware in the Spanish language and literature program, and then ended up adding a criminal justice major after that. And I studied that for 4 years and graduated, but towards the end of it, I had decided that speaking Spanish every day was going to be too difficult, and I didn't want to do that. So I began to sort of seek the Lord's wisdom as to what I should do next, and someone suggested to me that maybe I should apply to law school. So I reluctantly prayed to God, and I said, God, if this is what you want me to do, this is a pretty heavy financial burden to be taking on, so I need some sort of sign from you. And so I applied to one law school, the only one in Delaware, and I applied at the last possible moment and took the entrance exam at the last possible time I could, and ended up scoring better than many of my future classmates. But the interesting part of this story is that about 3 weeks after I took the entrance exam, or received my score for the entrance exam, I got an email from the school saying, "Congratulations on your scholarship." At this point, I hadn't even received notice that I had been accepted. So it turns out that the school offered to pay for close to 2/3 of the tuition price. So I took that as a pretty good sign that was where God wanted me to be going at that point, at least. So as I approached my last semester of law school, I went to the Mid-Atlantic District Assembly and heard someone speak about a youth work and witness trip that was going to be coming up to Peru. And I made the mistake of expressing interest in that trip. So I ended up going on the trip and working with this team from my district. We worked on a couple of different churches and had a VBS, and one of the leaders did some purity classes, but the real work that started to happen on that trip was God started to speak to me in a pretty, not quite this clear, but a pretty clear way. God started to talk to me about potentially going back to Peru as a volunteer missionary for 6 months. After several days of fighting with that call and realizing that it wasn't a yes or no to a time of volunteer service, but a yes or no as to whether I was going to keep being a Christian, that I decided that I had to do what God was asking me to do. So I went home, and as you can see from these pictures, 2 of the things that I did was graduated from law school and then spent about 3 months, cooped up in dorm rooms. There's one of my best friends from law school. We were cooped up for 3 months studying for the bar exam. I would get up every morning at 5:30 and go to the gym to run because that was the only thing that I was allowed to do for myself. And then we would be in class from 8:30 to about 3:30 and then spend the rest of the time studying. So it was a relief when we finally graduated. And if you notice, if you pay real close attention, you can see that my legs are almost the same color as that sign. And this was the middle of July, so you know that I was inside for the entire summer studying for the exam. So after I took the bar exam, which was about a 12-hour exam spread over 3 days, 2 days later I got on a plane and I went to Peru, where I would be serving for 6 months in a variety of different ways. One of the ways that I did serve and help was help Jose David Acosta, who was the Work and Witness coordinator. I helped him to sort of organize teams and helped when the teams were there. As I was studying for the bar exam, though, he sent me a text message and said, "I have a surprise for you." And at this point, I was so engrossed in studying and stressed out about going to churches and sharing about my calling and just had way too much on my plate, so I just kind of ignored his surprise. And then he texted me again when I had finally graduated, or finally finished the exam and was on my way to Peru, and he said, "We have a team that's coming 2 weeks after you get here, but I have to go to a meeting in Argentina, so I won't be able to go with the team, so I'm going to send you by yourself." So 2 or 3 weeks after I got to Peru, a team arrived in the jungle to Campanilla, and the team was from Weirton, West Virginia. So I spent, I don't remember if it was a week or 10 days with them working on the Campanilla Church of the Nazarene. You can see the team on the right, and then the pastor and his boys were on the left there. But the church that we worked on, you can see it in the background, but here is the old building that was there, and it was a pretty old building. I can't remember exactly the time period, but what we were doing was laying bricks around the entire perimeter. I say that's what we were doing, but really what I was doing was just translating 24 hours a day, the whole time. There were three young men who were on the team. They were somewhere between 10 and 14 years old. So if anyone ever tells you that you're too young or too old to go on a Work and Witness trip, they're lying to you. Because these 3 boys taught an entire town in Peru how to play American football, which ended up looking something like a mix between rugby, soccer, and our football. But everybody had a lot of fun. One of the interesting things that the team did was hold a community bicycle race. So they bought a brand new bike and had all of the kids from the town line up and race their bikes an incredible distance. I was on the back of a motorcycle taking water to and from kids, and I thought that the race was pretty long on a motorcycle, but they went on their bikes and they won. So one of them won and got a brand new bike. This was something that was very interesting to me because it wasn't the typical kind of outreach that you see on a Work and Witness type team. I was very impressed with the Weirton team's interest in not only providing a building or providing even teaching, but in engaging in community and building community with the people that were there and showing that we're one big family. After I finished with the Weirton team, I went back to Lima and I ended up going with Jose David to a couple of the churches on his district because he was a district superintendent. And we went to the annual meetings. And in that capacity, I served as the official ballot counter and also the greeter at the door and the audiovisual guy and basically anything that was needed. And then I had my first experience of going shopping, which was a little bit surprising for me. because there were lots of things that were not packaged like I would have expected. And then there were lots of things that I don't even know how they should have been packaged because I've never seen them in a store before. When I went on that first Work and Witness trip with my district, I met several pastors from the South Central District in Peru, and am good friends with them even to this day. And two of them invited me to come and share at what's called an anniversary service. Now, do you guys celebrate the anniversary of the founding of your church? Or have you been to a service for that? Yeah, I had never been to a celebration of that kind until my friend Carlos, who's there in the blue, invited me to come spend time with them for the anniversary service weekend. The trick was that as I was headed to the airport, he messaged me and he said, so just so we're clear, you know that I'm expecting you to preach for one of the services. And I was like, oh, okay. I had never preached in English, let alone Spanish. And then when I got there, actually I wasn't going to the airport, I was going to the bus station. But when my bus arrived at 4 in the morning, we were taking a taxi back to his house, and he says, someone canceled, so I need you to share 2 times. So I guess it was a trial by fire. I got to preach twice in Spanish, and it was great. So this next picture is not the most flattering picture of me, but the reason I'm sharing it is because I am in this picture eating one of the delicacies of Peru. And it really is delicious. It's one of their favored dishes, but here you would buy it in a pet store. It's called cuy, and what it is it's guinea pig. So this was the second time that I got to taste the delicacy, and this time it was much better than the first time. And I don't know if you guys have eaten rabbit, but it kind of tasted a little bit like rabbit. And I didn't have to see it while it was still squeaking and running around, so that was okay. After I finished preaching and eating cuy with my friend Carlos, we climbed one of the mountains. So as you can see in the picture, Tarma is the city where he preaches, and the city is down in between several mountains. So the first day that I got there, I said, hey Carlos, have you ever climbed to the top of that mountain? And he said, no, why would I? And I said, I don't know, why don't we do it? And so for the next couple of days, that was kind of the joke that we were going to climb the mountain. And then on the last day, we did. And one of the exciting things that we were able to do was the 3 of us stopped at the top of the mountain, and we joined hands and we prayed over the whole city of Tarma. And it was a unique experience because we here, or I always pray for my own town, my own state, but it's not very often that I get to see the entire group of people and the houses and the businesses and all of that while I'm praying for the town of Milford. So it was a great experience. After I finished with Carlos, my friend Abel, who I also met on that first Work and Witness trip, invited me to come visit him in Ayacucho. Ayacucho is about 2,500 meters up in altitude, which is something like 7,500 feet, I think. And he had just had a Work and Witness team there with him, and they had redone his entire bathroom and the place where he was living. But this that you see here is his office. So what he was asking me to do was come help him use the jackhammer and the pickaxe and to clear out some of that stone. It was a lot of work, especially considering the altitude that I wasn't used to. I took a lot more breaks than I care to admit. And I have a scar on my leg to prove that I was there and that I don't know how to use a sledgehammer. But it was a good time working with him. One morning while I was there, we had just finished tearing out a bunch of rock, and I woke up the next morning and I went to go put my pants on, and I saw that there was a little brown ball of dirt on my pant leg. So I figured, okay, my pants are dirty now. So I went and put my pants on because I figured we're going to be working, so it's not really a big deal. And then the little brown ball of dirt opened up and started crawling up my pant leg toward me. So if you can't see, it's a scorpion. So I did a little bit of a leg shake dance, and it fell onto the ground. And this is the post-stomp picture. So it's no longer a threat in this picture. But that was the first time I'd ever seen a scorpion, and hopefully the last. After we finished with all the work, Jose came to meet us in Ayacucho, and we started to go up to some of the villages that are higher up in the mountains there. This is a monument that's on the way up that is a memorial of the revolution in South America, and it's one of the sites of one of the biggest battles that was fought in South America. And it's really an interesting story, but it's really also a long story, so I can't really share the whole story. But this monument was bought for Peru by other countries. So there's stones all around the base of it that say different nations' names, and the U.S. has a stone there, so it was neat to be able to be there. Something interesting that happened here was this is Abel. Abel and I were waiting for the car to come back. I don't know where it went, but we were waiting for it to come back. And these two girls came up to us and said, can you take a picture? And Abel and I were like, sure, we'll take your picture. And so he grabbed the camera and he sort of pointed it at them, and they were like, no, we want a picture with the gringo. So that would be me. And so it was there's a picture of me floating out there somewhere with people I don't know. So once we finished there, we went to the village of Rayama, which is 5,000 meters up, which is something like 15,000 feet up. Just to give you an idea of the altitude, Jose had to use a oxygen mask, not the whole time, but whenever he started to feel a little bit lightheaded. I fortunately had spent a week at a higher altitude, so it wasn't as big of a jump for me to go up. And also I'm a little bit younger than Jose, so maybe that helped. But to give you a better idea, while we were standing there outside, this mist came over the church, and I was like, wow, that was really quick that it got so misty. And one of the people that was there said to me, well, that wasn't mist, that was a cloud. So that's what I was dealing with there. So when we were in Rayama, one of the people who was in the church started to ask Jose a lot of questions, because he was the district superintendent, and this was a village that didn't really have a whole lot of contact with other people or people coming to visit. And she was asking a lot of questions through an interpreter, because she spoke Quechua and Jose spoke Spanish. So we had an interpreter from Quechua to Spanish. And then at one point, Jose had me say something in English. He translated the English to Spanish, and then the other guy translated the Spanish to Quechua. That was for some sort of illustration. But she was asking a lot of questions, and Jose at one point looked at her and said, well, a lot of these questions that you're asking, you can find the answers in your Bible. And he was right. Some of them, we would consider to be simple questions that have pretty easy answers. But she looked at him and she said, well, what about those of us who don't know how to read or write? And Jose said, I understand that that's the situation for you, but what about your husband? Can't he help you? Can't you guys read together and he help you learn and understand? And she was like, well, he can't read or write either. And as we looked around, we figured out that a lot of the people in the village just had no need to learn how to read and write. And it really made me start to think, as we were going down the mountain, I began to think of how many times I just didn't feel like reading my Bible, or I didn't feel like sharing something. And there's people all around the world that want to read their Bible, and they either don't have a Bible because they're not allowed to, or they have any number of Bibles, but they can't read or understand what it is that it's saying. So after we got back from our visit to the Ayacucho villages, we went to the city of Trujillo, which is in the northern part of Peru, for a conference that was being held for different lay people, different pastors and lay people from all around Peru. And what it was dealing with was sort of mentorship, discipleship, and sort of teaching how to pass that along, because they were implementing a new model in all of the South America region. And my job here was to be the sound guy. And at one point, I think I walked half a mile to go get some crackers because somebody needed crackers. But the next picture, you see Dr. Gustavo Crocker was the one who was coordinating the event. He's one of the 6 general superintendents in the Church of the Nazarene, and he's one of the only ones that doesn't require a Spanish interpreter when he goes to South America, because he's from Guatemala, even with a last name like Crocker. And I asked him about it, and he doesn't have any better idea how that happened than I do. So he was a very dynamic speaker, and he took people around. You can see in the picture to the right that he was having one person guide the other one while they were blindfolded. And we talked about different levels of trust and whether you actually do trust your brother to guide you over the creek that we went over. After that, we went to another training that was in the city of Chiclayo. This one was with what's called Living the Great Commission, which is another I can't think of the word, another thing that they're promoting, or initiative, there it is. I knew it would come to me if I was quiet and awkward for long enough. So it's another initiative that they were having on the South America region, and in this one they were sharing with many more pastors about the idea of pastoral care. The exciting thing about that trip for me was I walked into the kitchen of the seminary campus in Chiclayo, which is where the training was being held, and on the wall I saw a plaque. It's not this plaque, but it was a plaque that said, this kitchen was built with help from the Dover, Delaware Church of the Nazarene, which is about 20 minutes from where I live. So it was nice to see the effect that my home district had on Peru. This here is the South America Regional Headquarters. That's in Pilar, Buenos Aires in Argentina. I was invited to go attend a training on coaching that was there and to listen to part of the Regional Advisory Council meeting. But the best part about that whole trip was that I was able to see a lot more missionaries and meet a lot of the missionaries on the South America region and get to know what they all did and see the years and years of experience that were there. On Dr. David Busick was the general superintendent in jurisdiction in South America while I was there. So he was there for that meeting. And next to him in the picture is Dr. Christian Sarmiento, who's the regional director for the South America region. But on the Sunday while I was in Argentina, I went to a church service, and the church that I went to was very, very unique in the sense that there were many different nationalities represented in the congregation. In this picture that's here, I think there are 10 different nationalities. There's someone from Costa Rica, someone from Guatemala, someone from Brazil, someone from Argentina, well, several people from Argentina, one person from Peru, someone from the US, it's me, someone from Mexico, and someone from Ecuador, and I think someone from Paraguay. And on the right you see David Gonzalez and his wife Tabita, who are both we're both missionaries to the South America region. Tabita is the one who was doing the job that I'm going to be doing when I go to Ecuador, and David is now the regional NYI coordinator. After we got back from Argentina, I got to go to the city of Iquitos, which is the largest city in the world that's only accessible by boat or plane. So we opted for the plane option because the boat option was about 3 or 4 days, I think. But we were there to work with a child development center. The Church of the Nazarene in Peru has 8 child development centers, and overall there are several more that are in the process of being approved. But the one in Iquitos, there are 3 of them in Iquitos, and we went there to talk to them about different disaster preparedness, because earthquakes and flooding are issues there in Peru, and also to talk about safety plans for children. And I was able to take a picture of the Amazon River while I was there, which if you had told me 2 years before that I was going to be standing next to the Amazon River, I would have told you, no, you don't know who you're talking to. But God sometimes takes you places you don't expect. While we were there, we were also able to be part of the district assembly, and the children sang for us. And they so you can see where this picture's taken from. It's taken from the very front, right next to the stage. And so it would be right about where those stones are over there. And that is where they put my chair and Pastor Jose David's chair during the whole district assembly. We got to sit right in front of everyone and watch everything. I think they really just didn't understand who I was. But maybe I don't know. So after we got back from Iquitos, a holiday came around that we celebrate here in the US, but doesn't get celebrated really in Peru. And we are there eating in a Chili's. So can anybody guess what holiday it is that we're celebrating here? Thanksgiving. I heard it somewhere. Yeah, so we couldn't find a turkey dinner anywhere, so we settled for chicken tacos at Chili's. That's my friend Angel, there with the hat and the ear of corn. He works in Kansas City, but he's from Guatemala, and he has learned to love Thanksgiving, so he texted me and said we need to go find some Thanksgiving dinner. After Thanksgiving, the games for the Peruvian football team qualification for the World Cup began. So I had to get a t-shirt for the team, because I couldn't be the only person in the whole city of Lima that didn't have a t-shirt. And how many people here watched the World Cup at all? Yeah? Okay, that's about the typical response, 1 or 2 people. Just to give you an idea of how popular it was in Lima, one night I wasn't feeling very well. So instead of watching the game, I went to my room and I laid down, and about 10 minutes later, I heard this roar from outside, and I couldn't figure out what was going on. And then I realized Peru scored a goal. And it wasn't just like the neighbors screaming, like I just heard the entire city screaming. And it would go in waves, because some people's TV was a little bit slower than other people's, so they would get the goal a few minutes early or a few minutes later than we would. One of the things that I did during the majority of my downtime, I'll call it, was to translate child sponsorship cards. So through Nazarene Compassionate Ministries, Peru has over 500 children that are sponsored through child sponsorship. That's the most in South America. And every child sends a letter to their sponsor, or is supposed to send a letter to their sponsor every quarter. And all of those letters have to be translated from Spanish into English. And that's done on the field or the region, and that was my blessing. When I arrived to Peru, there was a stack of about 500 or maybe like 300 or 400 letters that were waiting for me to translate. And then I was there for 2 more sets. So I translated somewhere between 11 and 1,200 child sponsorship cards. The picture there on the left is around Christmas time, I think, when I had more Christmas cards than I have ever received in my entire life, and none of them were for me. We ended up celebrating Christmas. This is the Acosta family who I was staying with, and also the field strategy coordinator's family. We all got together and got matching t-shirts and ate Christmas. And then we did the traditional post-dinner celebration, which was to watch the fireworks. Because in Peru and other parts of South America, fireworks are something that happens because it's the middle of the summer there. So I climbed up on the roof and I looked around the city, and there were fireworks as far as you could possibly see. After Christmas, we, meaning Jose and I and a few of those pastors, Carlos and Abel, and a couple of other pastors, went to the south of Peru to Pisco, which is where that original Work and Witness team went to prepare for them coming again. So we set up all the columns and beams that were going to be filled with cement, and we dug a giant hole for a foundation because the reason is because digging the hole for the foundation is the work of maybe 4 or 5 people. But it takes a couple of days because it's a lot of work for 4 or 5 people. And you don't want to have a team of 15 people there waiting for 4 or 5 people to finish that part of the job. So we went for a week, and we got up at 6:30 in the morning and went to bed at 10:30 at night and ate at least 1 meal in between there. But it was a lot of fun to spend the time with the local pastors and preparing for my home district to come for the team, this is them. I don't have any pictures of them facing the camera for some reason, so you guys get a picture of the Mid-Atlantic District Work and Witness team from behind. I'll say it's because they were working the whole time. So as my time was wrapping up in Peru, I began to feel God, feel like this was what God wanted me to do more long term. So I started reaching out to different leaders on the South America region, in different countries on the South America region, asking for other opportunities to serve as a volunteer. And I had a couple of communications with different pastors or leaders, and then all of a sudden all of those just sort of stopped. And I didn't really understand why, but I ended up going home in the end of January of 2018. And 2 weeks after I got home, I went in to see my preceptor for the bar exam, who was the head of the Sussex County Attorney General's office. And I needed to talk to him about some of the stuff for getting my bar license. By bar is the group of all the attorneys. It's not like the alcohol serving kind. That has led to some confusion with Facebook posts and Google Translate. But I went to him, and as we were talking about my license, he said, we have a position open here. And my initial reaction was, well, I'm not supposed to be here. I'm not supposed to work here. This isn't what I feel like I'm supposed to do. So I went home, and then 2 weeks later I had to go talk to him again, and he says, well, we still have a position open, and 2 people have applied now, so if you're interested at all, you should apply. And it was kind of one of those you should apply kind of things. So I applied, and I ended up getting the job. So I worked for about a year for the Attorney General's office in Delaware. Actually, it was, I think, 12 days short of a year. But the picture on the right there is my mom with me at the Supreme Court House in Delaware as I got sworn in with my bar license because I did pass the bar exam, which in Delaware is no small feat. Well, it's no small feat anywhere, but in Delaware they're particularly notorious for a difficult exam. However, when that picture was taken, there was something else that was going on in my life. My dad, about a month after I got home, my dad had COPD, and he ended up having an exacerbation, which is where there's anxiety and you feel like you can't breathe, and the feeling like you can't breathe gives you more anxiety, which makes you short of breath, and it's just not a good situation. So I spent a couple of hours with him praying and hoping that he would come out of it. My dad had made it very clear that he didn't want to go to the hospital under any circumstances. But my prayer wasn't just that he would get better or that he would come out of it, but it was, God, I need the opportunity to talk with my dad about you, because I hadn't taken the opportunity that I had for years to make sure that my dad was right with the Lord. So after a couple of hours of sitting there and hoping and praying that dad would come out of it, my dad sort of woke up and looked at me and was like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "Well, I was hoping you would wake up." So then, given the second chance that I had, I did the incredibly intelligent thing and didn't talk to my dad again, and missed another opportunity to share with him or talk to him about God. And my dad had another exacerbation 2 weeks later, and we ended up having to call 911 at that point, and he spent a week in the ICU and came home on hospice care. But at that point, he had some damage from not being able to breathe for so long, and he was pretty heavily medicated. So I began to pray again to God, and I was pretty clear. I was like, I'm not going to waste this opportunity if you give me another chance. And I had his attorney coming to the house to sign some paperwork, and I said, God, on Thursday, if you'll please make it so my dad is of sound mind and clear mind so that I can talk to him about you. All that other stuff aside, but Thursday morning, please. And 8:30 in the morning on Thursday morning, I got to my dad's house, and he was sitting up in bed and looked at me the clearest that he'd been in a couple of years, probably. And so I had a good excuse because the lawyer was coming, so I got to clear the room pretty easily. I said, guys, I need to talk to my dad alone. And I looked at my dad and I said, have you been talking to God? And my dad kind of nodded, which was a surprise to me. And I said, because you told the chaplain or the hospice people that you didn't need a chaplain because your son was your chaplain. And that was also a surprise when he said that initially. And I said to him, so I need to have this conversation with you. And I said, because Jesus wants to forgive you of anything that you've done. It doesn't matter what it was. It doesn't matter how long ago it was. It doesn't matter how bad you think it was. He's ready and he's willing and he wants to do that for you. And he just looked at me and he said, I'm good. And it wasn't like I'm good, I don't need that kind of thing. It was like you don't have to worry, I've taken care of that. That's all taken care of. And so I have to give glory to God because not only did he have enough grace for my father to give him the opportunity to reconcile, but he had even more grace with me being so foolish and not taking the chance that I had to speak with someone who's very, very important to me and who needed to have that conversation. So I encourage you, don't waste time. Take the opportunity that you have because my dad did pass away on May 31st of last year. And that day that we talked was the last day that he was really awake. So I know that God had his hand in that. So after that sort of settled down, I enrolled at Nazarene Theological Seminary because that was something that I had planned on doing before my dad got sick, but I sort of put it on hold while I was helping to take care of him. And I am this week finishing my second semester at Nazarene Theological Seminary. I still have one paper and a final exam to do, but I am in a Master's of Divinity program through Nazarene Theological Seminary because apparently I just can't quit school. So stay tuned for what's next, I guess. But a couple of weeks before the end of my first semester, actually a couple of months before the end of my first semester, so around October or November, I got a text message saying that I was going to be getting a phone call, which is never really good when someone, well, it makes you nervous when someone texts you to let you know that you're going to be getting a phone call. But then a couple of days later, Christian Sarmiento, who's the regional director for South America, gave me a call, and he let me know that he and the team in South America wanted me to come back to South America to work as a missionary. So a couple of the things that I'll be doing, one, I'll be working with Christian and a couple of the other members of leadership to help to coordinate, doing some administrative things with the coordination of the regional ministries, regional level ministries. But the main thing that I'm going to be doing, I'm going to be living in Ecuador, but for the whole South America region, I'll be coordinating Nazarene Compassionate Ministries. So that's what Tabitha Gonzalez was doing before, and that is what I'll be doing soon. I had the opportunity in the end of January, or end of February maybe, to go to Peru for a meeting that they were going to be having with the regional team for Nazarene Compassionate Ministries. And I got to meet the whole team, and I got to hear about some of the things that are happening on the South America region. So I just want to share just a couple of them with you, if that's okay. I don't want to take too much of your time. But one of the exciting things that's happening on the South America region is what's called Mirada de Amor, which is look of love. And you might have seen some of this in the Nazarene news, but in Chile, it's kind of follows the model of a child development center, but not quite. What it is, it's a program and a service that the church there has for people with disabilities. So they're able to go to this development center, or this area, and they have a mock house where they teach them how to make their bed and handle other household things, use a cell phone, and they teach them life skills because what they want to do is they want to build independence for these people, because just as here, a lot of times this group of people is one that's overlooked, and it's a situation where if you tell someone constantly that they can't do anything, then they don't learn how to do anything, and nobody believes that they can do anything. But the Mirada de Amor is focused on enabling and equipping and believing that these people with disabilities can be self-sufficient and can survive on their own. So I'm very excited because the head of that ministry has come onto the regional team as a consultant, and there are going to be more of these kind of ministries opening up throughout South America, hopefully. One of the other things that's near and dear to my heart is this country. I don't know, can any of you guess, and do any of you know what flag that is from South America? As a hint, it's one of the countries in South America that's experiencing the most economic turmoil at this point. And it's Venezuela. So right now Venezuela is in political and economic, basically just desolation. Jose David, who I worked with very closely in Peru, he is from Venezuela, but is a missionary to Peru. So while a lot of this decline was happening, I was there and I was watching it, and I was hearing firsthand stories of their family and what was happening to them. The picture on the right is of trucks full of relief that came from other countries that was crossing the border at Colombia into Venezuela and was set on fire. It's a little bit unclear whether it was the Venezuelan military that set it on fire or whether it was the protesters accidentally set it on fire with their Molotov cocktails, but there's no relief that's being permitted to enter through the borders into Venezuela. So people are unable to buy or find very, very normal everyday things. When I was in Peru, several pastors came on a layover from Venezuela, and they asked while they were there, they said, is there any way that we could go to the supermarket? And the things that they were buying were things like shoes, toilet paper, aspirin, feminine products, things, and they just couldn't find these anywhere in Venezuela, or it would cost them 2 or 3 days worth of wages to buy 1 box of Kleenex or something like that. So Nazarene Compassionate Ministries is having to be pretty creative in how they're getting help and medicine and those kind of things to the Venezuelan people, but you can be sure that there are things that are happening in Venezuela. There are strong national leaders who are working there, and I am very excited to be able to help in whatever way I can to help the people there. So the final thing that I want to do is I just want to thank you guys for letting me come and share with you. I don't preach much, but I like to share stories and I like to share about my testimony because that's something that I've lived. So thank you for that, and also thank you for your contributions to the World Evangelism Fund, because without the World Evangelism Fund, I couldn't do what I'm doing as well as I can. It provides the infrastructure and the support to an extent for my ministry. I have cards out in the hall that you can pick up and take. I have a sign-up sheet out there also for an email update list that I'm going to try really hard to send out an update once a month or maybe once every 2 months. But I'm not the best at that, but I'm going to do my very best. So please sign up out there. And there's also little coins from Peru that you can take and put in your pocket. And when you feel it in your pocket, don't pray for me. Pray for what God's doing in South America. Pray for the people in South America and the souls that still have yet to hear Jesus' name in South America. Thank you.